Have you ever wondered if the choices you make are truly your own, or if they are somehow set in motion by forces far beyond your control? Imagine this. You travel back in time, carrying a book written by none other than yourself. You hand it to an influential figure from history, someone whose works shaped the course of civilization. That figure, inspired by your future work, claims the book as their own and publishes it for the first time. You return to your original timeline, and, to your surprise, the book is now part of history. But here's the catch. You never wrote the book in the first place. The only reason it exists is because you handed it to that historical figure who then created it, only to pass it back to you from the future. You didn't write the book, but you were the one who made it possible. And yet, without you handing it over, it would have never existed. This is the bootstrap paradox, a concept so mind-bending that it forces us to question everything we know about time, causality, and existence itself. The bootstrap paradox revolves around a loop of causality that seems to violate everything we've been taught about time. In simple terms, it describes a situation where an object or piece of information exists without ever having been created because it is passed around in time, creating a closed loop. To put it in perspective, imagine you go back in time and give Shakespeare a copy of his own works, which he then claims as his own. But wait, if Shakespeare never originally wrote those works, who did? The paradox is that the work has no real origin. It simply exists, passed through time, without any clear beginning or creator. This mind-boggling scenario raises questions about the nature of time itself. Can time truly loop back upon itself in such a way that the origin of an object or idea is lost in the endless cycle? Or is this just a failure in our understanding of time's linearity? Now, let's consider what this paradox means for our understanding of free will and causality. We like to think of the world as a place where cause and effect follow a clear linear path. A happens, and then B follows as a result. But what if the events of your life, your very existence, were part of a cycle that has always existed and always will? In the case of the bootstrap paradox, the chain of events you think of as being entirely in your control is, in fact, a loop. An infinite feedback loop where the origin is hidden and everything is merely passed down through time. If everything is predetermined in this way, does it mean we have no real agency over our actions? Are we simply playing out a role written by the forces of time itself? Imagine that you're now caught in the paradox. You receive an invention from your future self, a brilliant new idea that could change the world. But here's the thing. You never truly created this invention because you were given it by your future self, who got it from you in the first place. It seems to exist solely because of this continuous cycle, yet you believe you are the inventor. How can you claim ownership of something that had no true origin? This paradox raises a terrifying question about the very nature of identity. If we cannot even trace the true source of an object or idea, how can we trust our own sense of self? But as unsettling as it may be, the bootstrap paradox forces us to confront the reality that time may not be as linear as we once believed. We have always understood time as moving in one direction, forward. But what if time, like the objects in the bootstrap paradox, loops upon itself, creating endless possibilities and paradoxes that never resolve? Does this mean we live in a reality governed by predetermined events? Or is there a way to break free from this cycle? The answers may never be fully clear, but the very fact that we are even able to entertain such questions points to the deeply paradoxical nature of existence itself. As we begin to close the book on this paradox, we must consider, what if free will doesn't exist in the way we think it does? What if our choices are just echoes of decisions made in another time by a version of ourselves we have yet to meet? The bootstrap paradox, with all its contradictions and mysteries, leaves us with one profound conclusion. What we perceive as the flow of time may just be an illusion, and we may be caught in an endless loop of our own making. So as you try to sleep tonight, remember that time and causality might not be as simple as they appear. Perhaps, like the paradox itself, you're merely a part of a cycle that has no true beginning or end. And if you think this was perplexing, just wait until you hear about the grandfather paradox, where the very existence of your future self is at risk, an even deeper dive into the mysteries of time and causality. Stay tuned. What if someone told you, "I am lying"? Simple, right? But now think about it for a moment. Are they telling the truth or are they lying? If they are telling the truth, then the statement, "I am lying," must be false. But if it's false, then they must be telling the truth. This is the essence of the liar paradox, a self-referential riddle that has baffled philosophers for centuries, forcing us to confront the very nature of truth and deception. In this paradox, we are caught in a loop, an endless cycle where truth and falsehood blur into one inseparable whole, leaving us questioning the foundation of all logic. The liar paradox appears simple at first, but it strikes at the core of how we think about language and truth. When someone says, "I am lying," they are essentially making a statement about their own honesty. If their statement is true, then they are lying. But if they are lying, then the statement must be false, which means they are telling the truth. The paradox creates an infinite loop where one statement contradicts itself endlessly with no resolution. It's a logical puzzle that doesn't seem to have an answer, because once you engage with it, you can't escape the cycle of contradictions. The historical roots of the liar paradox trace back to the ancient Greek philosopher Epimenides, who is famously known for the statement, "All Cretans are liars." If Epimenides, a Cretan himself, is telling the truth, then his statement must be false, because he is a Cretan. But if his statement is false, then not all Cretans are liars, which means he may be telling the truth after all. This paradox not only challenges the idea of truth, but also opens the door to exploring the limits of language itself. Can we trust language to accurately convey reality, or are all statements, especially self-referential ones, flawed by design? The implications of the liar paradox reach beyond logic and philosophy. They influence how we perceive truth in the real world. If language can be self-contradictory, can we ever fully trust what others say? When someone claims to be honest, can we take their word for it? Are we all just trapped in a web of lies, where even the act of speaking the truth is a form of deception? The paradox also raises important questions about the limits of human understanding. If we cannot resolve the liar paradox, what does this say about our ability to comprehend the complexities of reality? Perhaps, like the paradox itself, there are some things we simply cannot know for sure. Now, Imagine for a moment that you are asked to declare whether the statement "I am lying" is true or false. At first, it seems straightforward. If they are lying, then the statement is false. If they are telling the truth, then the statement must be true. But as you try to analyze it, you find yourself caught in a spiral. Both answers contradict each other, and you can't escape the loop. It's as if the paradox has a life of its own, pulling you deeper into confusion. You try to make sense of it, but every attempt only deepens the mystery. Would you find peace in one answer, or would you spiral into endless questioning, forever trapped in the paradox? At the heart of the liar paradox lies a profound contradiction. How can a statement be both true and false at the same time? If a statement can be self-referential in such a way that it contradicts itself, what does this say about our understanding of truth? Does truth become meaningless if it can never be fully pinned down? And if truth is relative, how can we ever be certain of anything? The paradox forces us to confront our assumptions about language, logic, and the very nature of reality. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, our understanding of the world is far more uncertain than we would like to admit. The paradox doesn't just challenge the foundation of logic, it also casts doubt on our perception of reality. We rely on language to communicate and understand the world, yet this paradox shows that even our simplest statements can be deceptive. If language is flawed, then how do we know we are ever truly understanding anything? How can we trust what others say when their statements might be riddled with contradictions? In a world where truth is so elusive, are we ever able to fully grasp the nature of reality? But here's the twist. The liar paradox isn't just about logic or language. It's also a reflection of the uncertainty that defines human existence. Just as we struggle to resolve this paradox, so too do we struggle to understand the deeper truths of life. Perhaps the paradox itself is a metaphor for the human condition. We search for meaning and understanding, but the answers are often elusive, slipping through our fingers like sand. We may never resolve the contradictions of the liar paradox, but perhaps that's part of the beauty of it, the endless questioning, the mystery that keeps us engaged, forever searching for answers. Imagine a reality where, no matter how many times you die, you always wake up in another universe where you survive. Would you ever truly fear death again? This concept, known as quantum immortality, presents a terrifying and intriguing possibility, one where the concept of death is not a finality, but a transition, and you never truly cease to exist. The idea is rooted in quantum mechanics, specifically the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every possible outcome of an event is realized in a separate, parallel universe. What if you were to die in one universe, but your consciousness shifted to another, where you continue to live? This mind-bending thought experiment leads to the unsettling realization that, in a multiverse, death may not be the end. It could merely be the beginning of yet another version of yourself, continuing to exist in an infinite number of realities. At its core, quantum immortality suggests that, if we take the many worlds interpretation seriously, then every time a life or death decision is made, the universe splits. In one version, you survive, and in another, you perish. But, according to quantum immortality, it's your consciousness that jumps into the version where you survive. This means, in theory, you could never truly die, because your awareness will always follow the path where you continue to exist. In this view, death is not an end, but a shift into a parallel universe where you are alive. In one reality, you might be struck by a car, but in another, you dodge it at the last second. It's not just a single life you are living, but an endless series of lives, all depending on which version of you survives the fateful moments of your existence. This theory challenges the very notion of death as we understand it. In our conventional view, death is final. It is the cessation of consciousness, the end of an individual's life. But if the many worlds theory holds, and your consciousness shifts between universes, death as we know it becomes irrelevant. What's fascinating and disturbing is the implication that you would never consciously experience your own death. If you were to die in one universe, you would simply wake up in a new one, unaware of your previous demise. This creates a never-ending loop of survival. But at what cost? Would immortality, in this sense, still be desirable? Would you even know you're immortal if your consciousness is always transitioning to a new reality? Would the endless stream of lives make you feel connected to the person you used to be? Or would you feel utterly disconnected from your true self, unable to experience the full span of your existence? Now let's imagine you're standing at the edge of a cliff, a fall that you can't avoid. The moment before you plummet to your death, your consciousness shifts to another universe, one where you never fell. In this new reality, you're safe, but in another universe, you died. This shift happens so seamlessly that you're completely unaware of the other possibilities. Is this immortality, or is it simply the never-ending continuation of your life in alternate universes? What happens when you die in one reality but continue living in another? And if every version of you is alive somewhere, does it mean you're truly immortal? Or is your life just one of an infinite number of parallel existences that could be happening simultaneously? This is where the paradox of quantum immortality becomes particularly unsettling. The implications of quantum immortality are profound. On one hand, the idea of never truly dying, of always surviving, may seem comforting. It challenges the finality of death and suggests that, in some form, we could exist forever. But on the other hand, this concept forces us to question what it means to truly live. If immortality is simply the perpetual transition from one version of you to the next, then is there any continuity of self? Or are you merely existing in a series of parallel realities, each one no more meaningful than the last? And if your consciousness is always shifting to the universe where you survive, do you ever really experience the full richness of life? Or are you trapped in an endless loop, disconnected from your true essence? The psychological and existential implications of quantum immortality are also troubling. Living forever might sound appealing, but if immortality means that you are always jumping between realities, it raises a difficult question. What does it feel like to live an existence that never truly ends, yet never offers a complete sense of who you are? The infinite continuation of self may seem like a gift, but in the context of a never-ending multiverse, it may become an existential curse. What if the ship you've sailed for years is gradually replaced, plank by plank, until none of its original parts remain? Is it still the same ship? This is the heart of the ship of Theseus paradox, a question that challenges our very understanding of identity and change. Imagine that you have a favorite jacket, one that has weathered countless seasons with you. Over the years, the fabric begins to fray, and the thread starts to break. Gradually, each part of the jacket is replaced. First the zipper, then the cuffs, and eventually, every single thread of fabric is swapped out. After a while, you look at the jacket, and not a single original piece remains. Yet, when you put it on, it still feels like your jacket. But is it still the same? Or has it become something else entirely? The ship of Theseus paradox presents us with a mind-bending question. When all of the components of an object are replaced over time, does it remain the same object? The ancient Greek philosopher Plutarch first posed this riddle, asking whether a ship that has had every part replaced over time could still be called the same ship. At what point does it stop being the original ship and become something new? Is identity something that can be reduced to the sum of its parts, or is it something more intangible, something that transcends physical components? This paradox doesn't just apply to inanimate objects like ships or jackets. It strikes at the very heart of our understanding of personal identity. Consider this: our bodies are constantly changing. Cells die and are replaced every day, and even our physical appearance transforms over the years. At what point do we stop being the same person? Are we still ourselves if every cell in our body has been replaced? This is the paradox of continuity and change. We like to think of our identity as a constant, something stable over time. But the ship of Theseus forces us to question this. If everything about us changes over time, is our identity really constant, or is it something fluid and evolving, dependent on the continuity of our experiences? Now, imagine this paradox in the context of a cherished possession, maybe an old car or an antique. Over the years, you replace parts. First the wheels, then the engine. Eventually, every part has been replaced. But you still think of it as the same car. What keeps it the same in your mind? Is it the continuity of ownership, the memories associated with it, or the physical components? Does the meaning you attach to the object make it the same, even if every part has been swapped out? This is where the paradox deepens. When identity and meaning are tied together, how much of ourselves are we willing to change before we become someone else? The ship of Theseus paradox invites us to confront the nature of identity itself. Can something be both the same and different at the same time? If the ship is entirely made up of new parts, is it still the original ship, or is it something new entirely? Similarly, if you replace every cell in your body over a lifetime, are you still the same person you were years ago, or has your identity shifted as well? Philosophers argue that personal identity might not be tied to the body's physical components, but rather to the continuity of consciousness and experience. Perhaps in the same way that the ship remains the same because it retains its purpose and function, we remain ourselves because of our continuous experiences, memories, and choices, despite the physical changes that happen to us over time. But the paradox also raises troubling questions about the nature of identity in a broader sense. If the ship of Theseus, or any object for that matter, loses its identity when every part is replaced, does that mean our identity is nothing more than the sum of our physical components? And if our bodies are in a constant state of flux, constantly replacing cells and organs, can we ever say that we are truly the same person over time? Is identity more than just physical persistence, or is it something deeply tied to the essence of being, something that exists beyond the physical? As we wrestle with the ship of Theseus paradox, we are left with an unsettling truth. Identity, whether in objects or in people, is not as clear-cut as we like to believe. It's neither a simple matter of physical continuity nor a matter of pure change. It's somewhere in between, a dynamic balance that we may never fully grasp. So, if identity can shift and change with time, can we ever truly define who we are? Or is it the very act of changing that makes us who we are? Imagine a prisoner sentenced to death. The judge tells him that he will be hanged at noon on one weekday, but with one condition: the execution will come as a surprise. The prisoner knows he will be hanged, but what he doesn't know is when. The judge's words seem straightforward. The hanging will take place on one weekday at noon, but the prisoner will not be able to predict the exact day. The more the prisoner thinks about it, the more perplexed he becomes. At first, it seems logical that the hanging could happen on any of the weekdays, but as he eliminates possibilities, he begins to feel trapped by the paradox. The more he tries to predict when the hanging will occur, the less he can be certain. At first glance, the judge's statement appears to be a fair one. The prisoner will be hanged, but not on the day he expects. The surprise is central to the paradox. The prisoner attempts to figure out the day of his hanging, logically eliminating possibilities. He knows it won't happen on Friday, because if it hadn't happened by Thursday, he would already know that it must happen on Friday, and therefore it wouldn't be a surprise. So he eliminates Friday. Then he knows that if the hanging didn't happen on Thursday, it must occur on Wednesday, but by a similar logic, he eliminates that day as well. Slowly, he eliminates every day of the week, until there are no possible days left for the hanging to occur. And yet, despite all of this, the hanging still takes place, as a complete surprise. The paradox lies in this contradiction. The prisoner knows he will be hanged, but cannot predict when. The very knowledge of the future is what prevents him from anticipating it. This paradox presents us with a deep challenge to our understanding of knowledge, prediction, and certainty. How can someone know that an event will happen and yet still be surprised by it? The more the prisoner knows, the less he is able to predict the outcome. What does this say about the nature of knowledge itself? Are we truly able to predict the future if our expectations can be so easily thwarted? Is it possible that the more we try to control our future or the outcomes in our lives, the more we are drawn into a web of contradictions? The paradox is not just about the prisoner and his fate. It's about the limitations of our ability to know what is to come. Consider this thought experiment. Imagine you've been told that something unexpected is going to happen to you, but you have no idea when. At first, you might feel comforted by the fact that something is inevitable. But as you try to predict it, you begin to second-guess yourself. Every time you think you've figured it out, a new layer of confusion arises. The surprise remains elusive, and yet you can't stop trying to figure it out. How often do we face similar situations in life? How often are we confronted with uncertainty, where we think we know what's coming, but it surprises us in ways we never imagined? The prisoner in the paradox is trapped in a similar web of uncertainty, forced to confront the unpredictability of life even when he believes he has it all figured out. The contradiction at the heart of this paradox is fascinating. The prisoner is aware that the hanging must occur at some point, yet the very fact of his knowledge renders it impossible for him to predict when it will happen. In a sense, The paradox forces us to reconsider our assumptions about knowledge and certainty. If we can never predict the future with absolute certainty, does that mean we're not in control of our own fates? Or is the uncertainty itself what makes life and the future so unpredictable and ultimately so exciting? We often think we can prepare for what's ahead, but the paradox reminds us that some things are beyond our grasp. And perhaps that's the point. The prisoner's inability to predict his hanging isn't just about his fate, it's a comment on the very nature of expectation itself. This paradox also challenges the idea of free will. If the prisoner is caught in a web of logic where every decision he makes to eliminate one day only confirms that the hanging is still coming, is he free? Or is his fate already sealed, trapped in a logical loop that leaves him powerless to change the outcome? Does the very act of knowing what's going to happen eliminate any sense of control, as if we're all prisoners to our expectations? As we close the book on this paradox, we are left with one unsettling truth. The unexpected hanging forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, our ability to predict, and the way we approach uncertainty. Maybe it's not the events themselves that surprise us, but rather our own expectations that blind us to what's coming. In life, we can never truly know what the future holds, and it's often the unpredictability of existence that shapes our experiences and decisions.